Good evening from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. The time is 8:31 p.m. on the 6th of October 2024. It's been a lovely day. I got gifted 3 large bags of clothes from my friend Lynn through her neighbour, Annette. Thank you, Annette. I'm going to share the abundance with my neighbours that live behind me because the young woman there is similar size to me, so they're going to come round, her and her partner, and help go through the clothes, see if anything's suitable for her. So I'm happy about being able to share the abundance that came to me rather astonishingly, and thank you to Lynn also, who keeps me in a constant flow of abundance, certainly in the clothing department. My darling girl. So, yes, it's been a very hot day and it's going to be very hot tomorrow. Tomorrow here they're celebrating the King's birthday, so it's actually a day off work for most people, so it doesn't really impact on my day since I'm not working, but yeah, just another hot day and a break for all the workers, which is nice. And and then Tuesday, as I said, my young friends are going to come round and choose some clothes that they might like or might fit them, or fit the young lass. And Wednesday, I'm planning on having an outing with my friend Jared. It's kind of a late birthday shindig because it was his birthday on the 28th of September. So it's shaping up to going to be a very lovely week with lots of sociable things. So I'm happy about that. Just eating a bit of salad too. Yeah. Anyway, in honour of my decision to read folkloric tales or magical tomes or whatever, I decided, since I don't have a TV anymore, damn it, but I'll rectify that soon, probably either when I get my next advance or when my settlement finally comes through. I'll buy myself, I won't spend a lot of money on a TV because I only really use it for watching Netflix or Prime. I don't actually watch free-to-air TV because I don't like the programming and the brainwashing that went on, especially during the COVID epoch, but has always gone on to all intents and purposes. And even if just watching Netflix and Prime, there's a fair bit of programming going on in the background of the shows. You kind of have to watch things and be consciously aware of all the psy-operative propaganda that gets slipped into stories. I think it's partly why I've decided to read mythological or folkloric or fairy stories, because there's ancient truths embedded into them that are not psy-operations, but deep humanistic truths that we need to nourish us with, especially in these dark times. Mama T has spoken. So when I made my videos yesterday, I kind of opened at random and I read like towards the end of the book. I think we were in the page 700s. So just to be random, I'll start from the very beginning tonight. We'll read from the first page and we'll read as far as we go until I get too tired. And if you're going to do something, start at the beginning. And I don't think I'll be making videos of the entire book, so if you enjoy it, get your own copy and read it at your own time and leisure and pace, and you won't have my crazy New Zealand Australian accent babbling in your ear as well. I kind of have to laugh. It says here, abridged edition. So this is the abridged edition, and it's let me see, with the index 971 pages long. I hate to think what the full edition was, but that would be nice to have a copy of the full edition. I decided some months ago, I don't really have the money for it, but I made the mistake of, over the years, because of clutter and not having a very large house, of giving away or giving to charity a lot of my Kabbalistic texts and a lot of my magical, my more occultist magical type books. And I regret it now. So I decided some months ago, actually inspired by Thomas Sheridan on his channel, that we should all be buying our own hard copy magical books and rebuilding our library in the event that we have some kind of mass solar flare or some other fucking disaster takes out our technology. We still have our hardcover books to entertain ourselves with. And also it acts as good insulation, not so much here in Queensland where houses tend to get very humid and mouldy, but in Ireland where he comes from, it's very cold in winter, and lining your walls with bookshelves full of books is actually quite good insulation. So not such a silly idea. And also, whenever you feel like reading something quirky or unusual, you'll always have something in your library. So anyway, enough waffle about that. Let us begin at the beginning and see how long I can go before I peg out. I'm not too tired this evening, not like I was yesterday, but it is what it is, people of Earth. There is a preface, but I won't bother with that, and table of contents, and anyway, I won't bother with that. We'll just start. Chapter 1. Are you ready, beautiful people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities? The King of the Wood. Number 1. Diana and Verbius. Who does not know Turner's picture of the Golden Bough? I don't actually, to be honest. Let's not pretend I know things I don't. It's not this one, is it? The cover? I don't think so. I don't see a bough on it. It's a very pretty cover. I've always loved the artwork on this, especially the unicorn, which is, along with Pegasus, one of my favourite kind of animals, mythical animals that is, and the dragon, of course. Who doesn't like a dragon? Babies. And I myself am not a dragon, but a wood snake in Chinese astrology, so there is that too. So where were we? Who does not know Turner's picture of the Golden Bough? The scene, suffused with the golden glow of imagination, in which the divine mind of Turner steeped and transfigured even the fairest natural landscape, is a dreamlike vision of the little woodland lake of Nemi, Diana's mirror, as it was called by the ancients. No one who has seen that calm water lapped in a green hollow of the Alban Hills can ever forget it. The two characteristic Italian villages which slumber on its banks, and the equally Italian palace whose terraced gardens descend steeply to the lake, hardly break the stillness and even the solitariness of the scene. Diane herself might still linger by this lonely shore, still haunt those woodlands, wild. Diana, if you remember in Roman mythology, is the goddess of the moon and the goddess of the hunt. In antiquity, the sylvan landscape was the scene of a strange and recurring tragedy. On the northern shore, on the northern shore of the lake, right under the precipitous cliffs on which the modern village of Nemi is perched, stood the sacred grove and sanctuary of Diana Namorensis, or Diana of the Wood. The lake and the grove were sometimes known as the Lake and Grove of Aricia, or Aricia. But the town of Aricia, the modern Laricia, was situated about 3 miles off at the foot of the Alban Mount and separated by a steep descent from the lake, which lies in a small crater-like hollow on the mountain side. In this sacred grove there grew a certain tree round which at any time of day, and probably far into the night, a grim figure might be seen to prowl. In his hand he carried a drawn sword, and he kept peering warily about him, as if at every instant he expected to be set upon by an enemy. He was a priest and a murderer, and the man for whom he looked was sooner or later to murder him and hold the priesthood in his stead. Such was the rule of the sanctuary. A candidate for the priesthood could only succeed to office by slaying the priest, and having slain him, he retained office till he was himself slain by a stronger or craftier. The language is a bit stilted, I must remind you. It was written in 1922 and it's by Sir James George Fraser, who was a Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. He's not your average idiot. He had quite a few degrees, but however the language is a bit difficult for me to read and stilted. Yes, first published in 1922. And it's hard for me to read because there's not many paragraph breaks and it kind of all runs together, and it's hard bloody work reading this to you actually. I hope you appreciate my time and my energy and my effort. If you don't, you have the power of the X button, or however you switch me off on your personal laptop or computer, or phone or iPhone or Android. You're under no obligation to participate in my reality or my psychedelic dreaming or my preferential readings that I bestow upon you of my own free will and my own time. Yay! But anyway, where was I? The post which he held by this precarious tenure, carried with it the title of king. But surely no crowned head ever lay uneasier or was visited by more evil dreams than his. For year in, year out, in summer and winter, in fair weather and in foul, he had to keep his lonely watch, and whenever he snatched a troubled slumber, it was at the peril of his life. The least relaxation of his vigilance, the smallest abatement of his strength of limb or skill of fence, put him in jeopardy. Grey hairs might seal his death warrant. To gentle and pious pilgrims at the shrine, the sight of him might well seem to darken the fair landscape, as when a cloud suddenly blots the sun on a bright day. The dreamy blue of Italian skies, the dappled shade of summer woods, and the sparkle of waves in the sun can have accorded but ill with that stern and sinister figure. Rather we picture to ourselves the scene as it may have been witnessed by a belated wayfarer on one of those wild autumn nights when the dead leaves are falling thick and the winds seem to sing the dirge of the dying year. It is a sombre picture set to melancholy music, the background of forest showing black and jagged against a lowering and stormy sky, the sighing of the wind in the branches, the rustle of the withered leaves underfoot, the lapping of the cold water on the shore, and in the foreground, pacing to and fro, now in twilight and now in gloom, a dark figure with a glitter of steel at the shoulder whenever the pale moon, riding clear of the cloud rack, peers down at him through the matted boughs. The strange rule of this priesthood has no parallel in classical antiquity and cannot be explained from it. To find an explanation, we must go farther afield. No one will probably deny that such a custom savours of a barbarous age and, surviving into imperial times, stands out in striking isolation from the polished Italian society of the day, like a primeval rock rising from a smooth-shaven lawn. It is the very rudeness and barbarity of the custom which allow us a hope of explaining it, for recent researches into the early history of man have revealed the essential similarity with which, under many superficial differences, the human mind has elaborated its first crude philosophy of life. Accordingly, if we can show that a barbarous custom, like that of the priesthood of Nemi, has existed elsewhere, if we can detect the motives which led to its institution, if we can prove that these motives have operated widely, perhaps universally in human society, producing in varied circumstances a variety of institutions specifically different but generically alike, if we can show, lastly, that these very motives, with some of their derivative institutions, were actually at work in classical antiquity, then we may fairly infer that at a remoter age the same motives gave birth to the priesthood of Nemi. Such an inference, in default of direct evidence as to how the priesthood did actually arise, can never amount to demonstration, but it will be more or less probable according to the degree of completeness with which it fulfills the conditions I have indicated. The object of this book is, by meeting these conditions, to offer a fairly probable explanation of the priesthood of Nemi. I don't know if it's Nemi or Nemi, Nemi. So there you go. It occurred to me it could be pronounced that way too. I begin by setting forth the few facts and legends which have come down to us on the subject. According to one story, the worship of Diana at Nemi, I'm just going to run with Nemi, just for coherence sake, you understand. Otherwise I'll start going crazy. You don't want to see Mama T go crazy. It's not pretty. Was instituted by Orestes, who, having killed Thoas, king of the Tauric Chersonese, the Crimea, in brackets, fled with his sister to Italy, bringing with him the image of the Tauric Diana hidden in a faggot of sticks. Tauric, I would assume, relates to bulls, like the symbol of Taurus in the zodiac. After his death, and I'm making an assumption there, so, don't take me too much serious. Just making assumptions based on, my limited knowledge of shit I think I know, but actually don't know what I'm talking about. But sometimes intuitively I stumble on the tree. Be afraid, babies, when Mama T puts the pieces of the puzzle together and stumbles on the tree. If I've been deceived or lied to, or led up the golden path. Led up the path, there will be consequences. You will see what happens when I go a little crazy. Sounds like a nasty threat, but it's actually not. But you'll see an epic tantrum if I catch people out playing me for some kind of dick, am I right? Happens regularly. Sometimes I don't mind. Sometimes I just let people just play themselves out. Because the truth remains the truth and is always revealed in time. Remember that. Mama T has ways of finding things out, sometimes in the most astonishing metaphysical ways, from unexpected sources, by the way. So, I love it when that happens. I love when I get to the end of the story. After his death, his bones were transported from Arisia to Rome and buried in front of the temple of Saturn on the Capitoline, by the gods, Capitoline slope beside the temple of Concord. The bloody ritual, which legend ascribed to the Tauric Diana, is familiar to classical readers. It is said that every stranger who landed on the shore was sacrificed on her altar, but transported to Italy, the rite assumed a milder form. Within the sanctuary at Nemi grew a certain tree of which no branch might be broken. Only a runaway slave was allowed to break off, if he could, one of its boughs. Success in the attempt entitled him to fight the priest in single combat, and if he slew him, he reigned in his stead with the title of King of the Wood, Rex Nemorensis. According to the public opinion of the ancients, the fateful branch was that Golden Bough, which, at the Sibyl's bidding, Aeneas plucked before he essayed the perilous journey to the world of the dead. The flight of the slave represented, it was said, the flight of Orestes. His combat with the priest was a reminiscence of the human sacrifices once offered to the Tauric Diana. This rule of succession by the sword was observed down to imperial times, for amongst his other freaks, Caligula, thinking that the priest of Nemi had held office too long, hired a more stalwart ruffian to slay him, and a Greek traveller who visited Italy in the age of the Antonines remarks that down to his time the priesthood was still the prize of victory in a single combat. Of the worship of Diana at Nemi, some leading features can still be made out. From the votive offerings which have been found on the site, it appears that she was conceived of especially as a huntress, and further as blessing men and women with offspring, and granting expectant mothers an easy delivery. Where were you when I needed you, Goddess Diana? by the gods. Again, fire seems to have played a foremost part in her ritual, for during her annual festival, held on the 13th of August, at the hottest time of the year, her grove shone with a multitude of torches, whose ruddy glare was reflected by the lake, and throughout the length and breadth of Italy, the day was kept with holy rites at every domestic hearth. Funny I asked that, like tongue-in-cheek, right? Asking the goddess Diana, she who bestows easy deliveries upon labouring women. I said it tongue-in-cheek. And then as I continued reading to you, do you know what the answer came through? Through my consciousness. Probably my own subconsciousness. It wasn't a spirit, I didn't hear a voice this time. But it was a clear message. The answer came through: had your husband been more of a loving husband and partner to you, and had you had a true love relationship with your husband, well, I did love him quite deeply as a young girl because I didn't know any better. Duh. But had you had a man that truly adored, valued, cherished, respected you, she said, your labours would have been easier and kinder, and even perhaps at times almost pleasurable. And you know what? That sounds sarcastic, but I have heard new mothers saying that some of their labours, and they were deeply in love with their husbands and their husbands deeply in love with them, had almost felt orgasmic. That is a phenomenon, people of Earth, having children with men who despise you. I don't recommend it, probably wouldn't do it ever again, but to be fair, I fought to keep my second child, who was a little bit of a surprise bundle. And no regrets. I love my daughters, but my labours were hell on earth. And I was lucky though that I didn't require caesareans, because that too is a difficult birth, but it's touch and go. We almost lost Jasmine, almost lost her. But anyway, here we go. I won't go into details because it's too gory, and I've probably mentioned it in other videos in my journal entries, am I right? So we won't rehash over old ground. We're creating new and beautiful stories from now for the rest of eternity, people of Earth. Sometimes you have to hash the old ground though to bring up the happy ending at the end. So what I'm talking about is I'm going to focus on the happy ending. It may not end for quite some time because, according to my psychiatrist, he's aiming to keep me alive for another 30 years. That's a lot of happy endings, babies. Just saying. Anyway, looks creepy. I just saw myself as I did that into the camera. There's a bit of lag with this camera. That was kind of look creepy. But you know what I mean, don't you? I don't mean anything sleazy or lascivious by that per se. Like the wink was in joke. I just mean 30, possibly 30 more years of existence on this planet, which feels like torture, might actually be a good thing if I have a happy ending, someone who truly loves me. So let's focus on that. Amen, sister. High five, high five, high five. Oh, you have to laugh. It's kind of hilarious. Can't take things all seriously. Right, where was I? Segueing, because I got triggered about the easy deliveries. Right, here we go. I'll repeat that sentence where I segued off from. Again, fire seems to have played a foremost part in her ritual, for during her annual festival held on the 13th of August, at the hottest time of the year, this would be in Italy, Her grove shone with a multitude of torches, whose ruddy glare was reflected by the lake, and throughout the length and breadth of Italy the day was kept with holy rites at every domestic hearth. Bronze statuettes found in her precinct represent the goddess herself, holding a torch in her raised right hand, and women whose prayers had been heard by her came crowned with wreaths and bearing lighted torches to the sanctuary in fulfilment of their vows. Some, one unknown, dedicated a perpetually burning lamp in a little shrine at Nemi for the safety of the Emperor Claudius and his family, which is kind of interesting because we have the Ner Tamid in Judaism, a perpetually burning electric lamp in our temples and synagogues. So it came from Roman tradition, obviously. The terracotta, which means there's nothing new under the sun, as King Solomon used to say. The terracotta lamps which have been discovered in the grove may perhaps have served a like purpose for humbler persons. If so, the analogy of the custom to the Catholic practice of dedicating holy candles in churches would be obvious. Further, the title of Vesta, borne by Diana at Nemi, points clearly to the maintenance of a perpetual holy fire in her sanctuary. A large circular basement at the northeast corner of the temple, raised on 3 steps and bearing traces of a mosaic pavement, probably supported a round temple of Diana in her character of Vesta, like the round temple of Vesta in the Roman Forum. Here, the sacred fire would seem to have been tended by Vestal virgins, for the head of a Vestal in terracotta was found on the spot, and the worship of a perpetual fire cared for by holy maidens appears to have been common in Latium from the earliest to the latest times. Further, at the annual festival of the goddess, hunting dogs were crowned and wild beasts were not molested. Young people went through a purificatory ceremony in her honour. Wine was brought forth. Why couldn't he just say a purifying ceremony? Like, why complicate things, Mr. PhD, blah, 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 you're a dirty whore, okay? Well, he's probably not a dirty whore, but by the gods. Sir James George Fraser, FRS, FBA, Doctor Honoris Causa of the Universities of Paris and Strasbourg. Honorary LLD, it's a doctor at law. Honorary DCL, no idea what even that is. Something to do with literature, one would assume. Oh yes, Doctor of Classical Literature. I've guessed it. Honorary Literary Doctor of Cambridge and Durham. Alright, smarty pants, but can you just stop using stilted, weird words that nobody uses anymore? It's like 2024, not 1922. I need to go back in time and tell him that he's a pain in my ass. How would he like that? I don't know, but he's got enough anthropological knowledge to put a curse on me, so I better be nice. I better be nice to the good doctor. Honestly. Wine was brought forth, and the feast consisted of a kid, which is, as everyone knows, a baby goat. Just felt the urge to say that. Cakes served piping hot on plates of leaves. And apples still hanging in clusters on the boughs. But Diana did not reign alone in her grove at Nemi. 2 lesser divinities shared her forest sanctuary. One was Egeria, the nymph of the clear water, which, bubbling from the basaltic rocks, used to fall in graceful cascades into the lake at the place called Le Mole, or Le Mollet, because here were established the mills of the modern village of Nemi. The purling of the stream as it ran over the pebbles is mentioned by Ovid, who tells us that he had often drunk of its water. Women with child used to sacrifice to Egeria because she was believed, like Diana, to be able to grant them an easy delivery. Tradition ran that the nymph had been the wife or mistress of the wise King Numa, that he had consorted with her in the secrecy of the sacred grove, and that the laws which he gave the Romans had been inspired by communion with her divinity. Plutarch compares the legend with other tales of the loves of goddesses for mortal men, such as the love of Cybele and the moon for the fair youths Attis and Endymion. According to some, the trysting place of the lovers was not in the woods of Nemi, but in a grove outside the dripping Porta Capena at Rome, where another sacred spring of Egeria gushed from a dark cavern. Every day the Roman Vestals fetched water from the spring to wash the temple of Vesta, carrying it in earthenware pitchers on their heads. In Juvenal's time, the natural rock had been encased in marble, and the hallowed spot was profaned by gangs of poor Jews who were suffered to squat like gypsies in the grove. What? Anyway, I think what he means by that they were having to use it as a lavatory. Am I correct in that assumption? I'm not sure. Sounds a bit like a veiled kind of suggestion, which is why I went, say what? We may suppose that the spring which fell into the lake of Nem was the true original Egeria, and that when the first settlers moved down from the Alban hills to the banks of the Tiber, they brought the nymph with them and found a new home for her in a grove outside the gates. The remains of baths which have been discovered within the sacred precinct, together with many terracotta models of various parts of the human body, suggest that the waters of Egeria were used to heal the sick, which may have signified their hopes or testified their gratitude by dedicating likenesses of the diseased members of the goddess in accordance with a custom which is still observed in many parts of Europe. To this day, it would seem that the spring retains medicinal virtues. The other of the minor deities at Nemi was Virbius, or Virbius, Virbius. Legend had it that Virbius was the young Greek hero Hippolytus, chaste and fair, who learned the art of venery from the centaur Chiron, and spent all his days in the greenwood chasing wild beasts with the virgin huntress Artemis, the Greek counterpart of Diana, for his only comrade. Proud of her divine society, he spurned the love of women, and this proved his bane. For Aphrodite, stung by his scorn, inspired his stepmother Phaedra with love of him, and when he disdained her wicked advances, she falsely accused him to his father Theseus. The slander was believed, and Theseus prayed to his sire Poseidon to avenge the imagined wrong. So, while Hippolytus drove in a chariot by the shore of the Saronic Gulf, the sea god sent a fierce bull forth from the waves. Now it's interesting, I'm reading this right now, because in a trance drumming some months ago, 2-3 months ago, I was called Desdemona. And I said, isn't that from, can't remember which play now, in Shakespeare? I had to look it up. I couldn't quite remember. But Desdemona was falsely accused by her husband of having an affair. Was it with his friend or a compatriot? I can't remember now. Othello. It's in the play Othello. Anyway, Desdemona gets murdered because she's accused of having an affair, right? By her jealous husband. But she didn't actually have the affair, I think that's how the story went. But the husband thought he did. And I'm like, why are you calling me Desdemona? I'm not having any affairs. So it was a bit odd. But here we have again that story, that theme of someone being falsely accused of having an affair. So, odd. A bit odd. And part of what was contributing to the end of my marriage was I was falsely accused of having an affair back then. And although there was kind of an emotional affair because my husband kept inviting my beautiful friend into our private life and bringing him home, and we just sat around basically reading tarot cards and doing Ouija board a lot of the times. It was a completely platonic friendship and remains so to this day. My vicious, slanderous husband went round lying about me to all my staff members and all my customers and everyone and anyone, the entire Jewish community, telling everyone that I was having an affair, which I was actually, ironically, as far as the sexual act, completely innocent of. Hadn't even, to this day, we have never even kissed apart from pecks on the cheek or little peck on the mouth like brothers and sisters. So it's kind of odd that this should become suddenly a theme or a reminder of not to have history repeat or be falsely accused of something I haven't done. At least in this current to this current time. And interesting. The truth remains the truth and will always be revealed in the end, babies. The slander was believed, and Theseus prayed to his sire Poseidon to avenge the imagined wrong. So while Hippolytus drove in a chariot by the shore of the Saronic Gulf, the sea god sent a fierce bull forth from the waves. The terrified horses bolted, threw Hippolytus from the chariot, and dragged him at their hoofs to death. But Diana, for the love she bore Hippolytus, persuaded the leech Esculapius, to bring her fair young hunter back to life by his simples. I don't know what he means by simples. Jupiter, indignant that an immortal man should return from the gates of death. Well, they must be really pissed off with me then, because I've only done it about, I've lost count. I think it's about 15 to 20 times now. By the gods. I'm grateful that I'm still alive, but it's still eminently weird. Am I right? Anyway, Jupiter, who in the equivalent in Greek mythology is Zeus, indignant that a mortal man should return from the gates of death, thrust down the meddling leech himself to Hades. But Diana hid her favourite from the angry god in a thick cloud, disguised his features by adding years to his life, and then bore him far away to the dells of Nemi, where she entrusted him to the nymph Egeria to live there, unknown and solitary, under the name of Verbius, in the depth of the Italian forest. There he reigned a king, and there he dedicated a precinct to Diana. He had a comely son, Verbius, who, undaunted by his father's fate, drove a team of fiery steeds to join the Latins in the war against Aeneas and the Trojans. Verbius was worshipped as a god, not only at Nemi, but elsewhere, for in Campania we hear of a special priest devoted to his service. Horses were excluded from the Arician grove and sanctuary because horses had killed Hippolytus. It was unlawful to touch his image. Some thought that he was the sun. But the truth is, says Servius, that he is a deity associated with Diana, as Attis is associated with the mother of the gods, and Erythonius with Minerva, which makes me wonder if my grandfather's name Erich is the root of that. Erythonius with Minerva. Minerva is the goddess of spring. And Adonis with Venus. What the nature of that association was, we shall inquire presently. Here it is worth observing that in his long and checkered career, this mythical personage has displayed a remarkable tenacity of life. I hear you, brother. It's a pain in my ass too. But never mind. Life, the Chaim, is for the living, so you might as well get on with it and enjoy it, am I right? Oh, dear goddess. Oh, dear goddess. Anyway, I had a wonderful time on Friday night. I had a wonderful time. I'm fairly certain that somebody is trying to pull my chain and set me up with men in the club, hoping that I'll, hook up with them, and could happen one day, but not inordinately young men. Give me a bit of grace and couth, for the love of all the gods. If I'm going to give up on my true love that I adore that is unavailable, I'm no Desdemona. I won't be swapping horses for a much younger man and sign up for even more mischief and mayhem than I've already unconsciously signed up for. So there is that, my darlings. But have no fear, Mama T is well aware little game's been played. It's delightful. Let's find some nipples and circle them as we speak. Oh, it's all madness, really. You have to have a laugh. Have to have a laugh. My other motto is, let's have some fun before we die. But I don't mean that kind of fun necessarily. I just mean a bit of joy and delight and human nature and little games that people think that they're going to play with me. The truth remains the truth, my darlings. But I love you all, even with your mischief. It's occurred to me that it might be actually a good thing if someone finds me a man worthy of my heart, my spirit, my light, my power. Am I right? But I don't like being set up on blind dates or any other kind of date, because I have a history of that going very, very bad. In fact, life-threateningly bad. So I get triggered when I have the merest compunction that there's that kind of manipulation going on. What the nature of that association was, we shall inquire presently. Here it is worth observing that in his long and checkered career, I think I read that already, this mythical personage has displayed, yes, I did, a remarkable tenacity of life. True hearts, true loves that are meant for me will always reveal themselves by their own actions and words and deeds and intentions. I always find out in the end. Sometimes it's almost killed me too. Let's be real here. David Davidson, Terry Rosilio, Michael Aarons, even Dave Charles, although he didn't actually lay his hands at my throat, might as well have killed me with his viciousness too. I'm well aware. Don't come the raw prawn with me, because I'm well aware. There may be quite a few people involved in this little game that I don't know who the main players are, but I'll find out. Someone will always tell me, sometimes capital S someone. So be very careful if you decide to play those kind of cruel, insensate, Neanderthal, saturnine type games with the mummy. I haven't gone out of my way to cause harm to anyone in my life now. My life's very, very isolated for a reason, to keep myself safe. But I love you all, and I realise that some of you may think that you're, wishing me well and wanting me to move on, and I get that. I do, and it will happen at the appointed time with the appointed person of my choosing, not being manipulated or cruel emotional games being played. Don't do that. It's not cricket. It's not Jamaica. It's not even downtown Australia, Mon. Mama T, the Tanya, wallows in the fecal matter and the dust of no man's treachery and ugliness. Remember that. I won't be sliding down that banister ever again. Done it, got the t-shirt, got the 30 years in practical terms of therapy, by the way. Won't do it. Won't. I come and go as I please. I talk to who I wish to talk to. I dance with whom I wish to dance with. I might even occasionally be playful and mischievous with someone I think's a bit of a good sport and can handle it. The man on Friday night couldn't handle it. I was only joking, for the love of all the gods. I'd already told him he was far too young for me. Just a year younger than my eldest daughter. I mean, come on, seriously? It's ridiculous. It's not even about age though. It's about people playing games. Don't do that. No need for that level of nastiness. Done nothing to you. I wasn't even going to confront this directly or even indirectly through my YouTube video, but there's an old saying that I've long lived by, and it's very wise and very practical. The only way to win a game is not to play. Remember that. I don't play games. I come with good intentions, heartfelt loving intentions. If those heartfelt loving intentions get soiled or despoiled by evil, malicious, weak, pathetic, undermining, sabotaging, cruel people, that's on you, babies, not on me. For we can hardly doubt that the saint Hippolytus of the Roman calendar, who was dragged by horses to death on the 13th of August, Diana's own day, is no other than the Greek hero of the same name, who, after dying twice over as a heathen sinner, has been happily resuscitated as a Christian saint. Didn't enjoy that bit of onion, and it won't agree with me, so there'll be anarchy and chaos later too, with my own gut. I'm at war in so many vectors of my life. I don't need wars with people who proclaim to love me, just saying. It needs no elaborate demonstration to convince us that the stories told to account for Diana's worship at Nemi are unhistorical. Clearly they belong to that large class of myths which are made up to explain the origin of a religious ritual and have no other foundation than the resemblance, real or imaginary, which may be traced between it and some foreign ritual. The incongruity of these Nemi myths is indeed transparent, since the foundation of the worship is traced now to Orestes and now to Hippolytus, according as this or that feature of the ritual has to be accounted for. The real value of such tales is that they serve to illustrate the nature of the worship by providing a standard with which to compare it, and further, that they bear witness indirectly to its venerable age by showing that the true origin was lost in the mists of a fabulous antiquity. In the latter respect, these Nemi legends are probably more to be trusted than the apparently historical tradition vouched for by Cato the Elder, that the sacred grove was dedicated to Diana by a certain Egarius Babius or Labius of Tusculum, a Latin dictator on behalf of the peoples of Tusculum, Aricia, Lanuvium, Laurentum, Cora, Tibur, Pometia, and Ardea. This tradition indeed speaks for the great age of the sanctuary, since it seems to date its foundations sometime before 495 BC, the year in which Pometia was sacked by the Romans and disappears from history. But we cannot suppose that so barbarous a rule as that of the Arician priesthood was deliberately instituted by a league of civilized communities, such as the Latin cities undoubtedly were. Must have been handed down from a time beyond the memory of man, when Italy was still in a far ruder state than any known to us in the historical period. The credit of the tradition is rather shaken than confirmed by another story which ascribes the foundation of the sanctuary to a certain Manius Egerius, who gave rise to the saying, "There are many mani at Aricia." This proverb some explained by alleging that Manius Egerius was the ancestor of a long and distinguished line, whereas others thought it meant that there were many ugly and deformed people at Aricia, and they derived the name Manius from mania, a bogey or bugbear to frighten children. A Roman satirist uses the name Manius as typical of the beggars who lay in wait for pilgrims on the Arician slopes. These differences of opinion, together with the discrepancy between Manius Egerius of Aricia and Egerius Labius of Tusculum, as well as the resemblance of both names to the mythical Egeria, excite our suspicion. Yet the tradition recorded by Cato seems too circumstantial, and its sponsor too respectable, to allow us to dismiss it as an idle fiction. Rather, we may suppose that it refers to some ancient restoration or reconstruction of the sanctuary, which was actually carried out by the Confederate States. At any rate, it testifies to a belief that the grove had been from early times a common place of worship for many of the older cities of the country, if not the whole Latin Confederacy. Number 2. Artemis and Hippolytus. I have said that the Arician legends of Orestes and Hippolytus, though worthless as history, have a certain value in so far as they may help us to understand the worship at Nemi better by comparing it with the ritual and myths of other sanctuaries. We must ask ourselves, why did the authors of these legends pitch upon Orestes and Hippolytus in order to explain Virbius and the King of the Wood? In regard to Orestes, the answer is obvious. He and the image of the Tauric Diana, which could only be appeased by human blood, were dragged in to render intelligible the murderous rule of succession to the Orestian priesthood. In regard to Hippolytus, the case is not so plain. The manner of his death suggests readily enough a reason for the exclusion of horses from the grove, but this by itself seems hardly enough to account for the identification. We must try to probe deeper by examining the worship as well as the legend or myth of Hippolytus. He had a famous sanctuary at his ancestral home of Troezen or Troezen, situated on that beautiful, almost landlocked bay where groves of oranges and lemons, with tall cypresses soaring like dark spires above the garden of the Hesperides, now clothe the strip of fertile shore at the foot of the rugged mountains. Across the blue water of the tranquil bay, which it shelters with the open sea, rises Poseidon's sacred island, its peaks veiled in the sombre green of the pines. On this fair coast, Hippolytus was worshipped. Within his sanctuary stood a temple with an ancient image. His service was performed by a priest who held office for life. Every year, a sacrificial festival was held in his honour, and his untimely fate was yearly mourned with weeping and, doleful chants by unwedded maids. Youths and maidens dedicated locks of their hair in his temple before marriage. His grave existed at Troezen, though the people would not show it. It has been suggested, with great plausibility, that in the handsome Hippolytus, beloved of Artemis, cut off in his youthful prime, and yearly mourned by damsels, we have one of those mortal lovers of a goddess who appear so often in ancient religion, and of whom Adonis is the most familiar type. Well, who doesn't like an Adonis from time to time when one is a goddess, am I right? Dear goddess. The rivalry of Artemis and Phaedra for the affection of Hippolytus reproduces, it is said, under different names, the rivalry of Aphrodite and Proserpine for the love of Adonis, for Phaedra is merely a double of Aphrodite. The theory probably does no injustice either to Hippolytus or to Artemis, for Artemis was originally a great goddess of fertility, and, on the principles of early religion, she who fertilizes nature must herself be fertile, and to be that she must necessarily have a male consort. On this view, Hippolytus was the consort of Artemis of Troezen, and the shorn tresses offered to him by the Troezenian youths and maidens before marriage were designed to strengthen his union with the goddess, and so promote the fruitfulness of the earth, of cattle, and of mankind. Well, we fucked up somewhere along there, didn't we, with the recent COVID epoch? Just saying. This is why we need to start venerating and bringing back the old gods who knew how to sustain all of life on planet Earth in perfect harmonic equilibrium. It is some confirmation of this view, that's my opinion, by the way, but I'm sticking to it. There is some confirmation of this view that within the precinct of Hippolytus at Troezen, there were worshipped two female powers named Damia and Oxysia, whose connection with the fertility of the ground is unquestionable. When Epidaurus suffered from a death, the people, in obedience to an oracle, carved images of Damia and Oxysia out of sacred olive wood, and no sooner had they done so and set them up than the earth bore fruit again. Moreover, at Troezen itself, and apparently within the precinct of Hippolytus, a curious festival of stone throwing was held in honour of these maidens, as the Troezenians called them, and it is easy to show that similar customs have been practised in many lands for the express purpose of ensuring good crops. In the story of the tragic death of the youthful Hippolytus, we may discern an analogy with similar tales of other fair but mortal youths, who paid with their lives for the brief rapture of the love of an immortal goddess. These hapless lovers were probably not always mere myths, and the legends which traced their spilt blood in the purple bloom of the violet, the scarlet stain of the anemone, or the crimson flush of the rose, were no idle poetic emblems of youth and beauty, fleeting as the summer flowers. Such fables contain a deeper philosophy of the relation of the life of man to the life of nature, a sad philosophy which gave birth to a tragic practice. What that philosophy and that practice were, we shall learn later on. Number 3, recapitulation. We can now perhaps understand why the ancients identified Hippolytus, the consort of Artemis, with Virbius, who, according to Servius, stood to Diana as Adonis to Venus, or Attis to the mother of the gods. For Diana, like Artemis, was a goddess of fertility in general and of childbirth in particular. As such, she, like her Greek counterpart, needed a male partner. That partner, if Servius is right, was Virbius. In his character of the founder of the sacred grove and first king of Nemi, Virbius is clearly the mythical predecessor or archetype of the line of priests who served Diana under the title of Kings of the Wood, and who came like him, one after the other, to a violent end. It is natural, therefore, to conjecture that they stood to the goddess of the grove in the same relation in which Virbius stood to her. In short, that the mortal king of the wood had for his queen the woodland Diana herself. If the sacred tree which he guarded with his life was supposed, as seems probable, to be her special embodiment, her priest may not only have worshipped it as his goddess, but embraced it as his wife. There is at least nothing absurd in this supposition, since even in the time of Pliny, or Pliny, I think it is, a noble Roman used thus to treat a beautiful beech tree in another sacred grove of Diana on the Alban hills. He embraced it, he kissed it, he lay under its shadow, he poured wine on its trunk. Apparently he took the tree for the goddess. The custom of physically marrying men and women to trees is still practiced in India and other parts of the East. Why should it not have obtained in ancient Latium? Reviewing the evidence as a whole, we may conclude that the worship of Diana in her sacred grove at Nemi was of great importance and immemorial antiquity, that she was revered as the goddess of woodlands and of wild creatures, probably also of domestic cattle, and of the fruits of the earth, that she was believed to bless men and women with offspring and to aid mothers in childbed, that her holy fire, tended by chaste virgins, burned perpetually in a round temple within the precinct. That associated with her was a water nymph Egeria, who discharged one of Diana's own functions by succouring women in travail, and who was popularly supposed to have mated with an old Roman king in the sacred grove. Further, that Diana of the Wood herself had a male companion, Virbius by name, who was to her what Adonis was to Venus, or Uttus to Cybele, and, lastly, that this mythical Virbius was represented in historical times by a line of priests known as Kings of the Wood, who regularly perished by the swords of their successors, and whose lives were in a manner bound up with a certain tree in the grove, because so long as that tree was uninjured, they were safe from attack. Clearly, these conclusions do not of themselves suffice to explain the peculiar rule of succession to the priesthood, but perhaps the survey of a wider field may lead us to think that they contain in germ the solution of the problem. To that wider survey we must now address ourselves. It will be long and laborious, but may possess something of the interest and charm of a voyage of discovery, in which we shall visit many strange foreign lands with strange foreign peoples, and still stranger customs. The wind is in the shrouds. We shake out our sails to it and leave the coast of Italy behind us for a time. Let me just quickly, it's a very short chapter, right? Okay, we can carry on to the second chapter, chapter 2, Priestly Kings. Probably won't read for much longer because I'm getting tired. Mama T must preserve her energy for the wild dance on the weekend. Be her own goddess, am I right? In mortal form. I don't ever aspire to be an actual goddess. Would not offend the gods in that way, but I'm a warrior goddess. I am a warrior goddess. Spirit warrior. The questions which we have set ourselves to answer are mainly two. First, why had Diana's priest at Nemi, the king of the wood, to slay his predecessor? Second, why before doing so had he to pluck the branch of a certain tree which the public opinion of the ancients identified with Virgil's Golden Bough? The first point on which we fasten is the priest's title. Why was he called the King of the Wood? Why was his office spoken of as a kingdom? The union of a royal title with priestly duties was common in ancient Italy and Greece. At Rome and in other cities of Latium, there was a priest called the sacrificial king, or king of the sacred rites, and his wife bore the title of Queen of the Sacred Rites. In Republican Athens, the second annual magistrate of the state was called the king and his wife the queen. The functions of both were religious. Many other Greek democracies had titular kings whose duties, so far as they are known, seem to have been priestly, and to have centred round the common half of the state. Some Greek states had several of these titular kings who held office simultaneously. At Rome, the tradition was that the sacrificial king had been appointed after the abolition of the monarchy in order to offer the sacrifices which before had been offered by the kings. A similar view as to the origin of the priestly kings appears to have prevailed in Greece. In itself, the opinion is not improbable, but it is borne out by the example of Sparta. almost the only purely Greek state which retained the kingly form of government in historical times. For in Sparta, all state sacrifices were offered by the kings as descendants of the god. One of the two Spartan kings held the priesthood of Zeus, Lacedaemon, the other the priesthood of heavenly Zeus. This combination of priestly functions with royal authority is familiar to everyone. Asia Minor, for example, was the seat of various great religious capitals peopled by thousands of sacred slaves and ruled by pontiffs who wielded at once temporal and spiritual authority, like the popes of medieval Rome. Such priest-ridden cities were Zela and Pessinus. Teutonic kings again, in the old heathen days, seem to have stood in the position and to have exercised the powers of high priests. The emperors of China offered public sacrifices, the details of which were regulated by the ritual books. The king of Madagascar was high priest of the realm. At the great festival of the new year, when a bullock was sacrificed for the good of the kingdom, the king stood over the sacrifice to offer prayer and thanksgiving, while his attendants slaughtered the animal. In the monarchical states which still maintained their independence among the Gallas of Eastern Africa, the king sacrifices on the mountain tops and regulates the immolation of human victims. And the dim light of tradition reveals a similar union of temporal and spiritual power, of royal and priestly duties in the kings of that delightful region of Central America, whose ancient capital, now buried under the rank growth of the tropical forest, is marked by the stately and mysterious ruins of Palenque. When we have said that the ancient kings were commonly priests also, we are far from having exhausted the religious aspect of their office. In those days, the divinity that hedges a king was no empty form of speech, but the expression of a sober belief. Kings were revered in many cases not merely as priests, that is, as intercessors between man and God, but as themselves gods, able to bestow upon their subjects and worshippers those blessings which are commonly supposed to be beyond the reach of mortals, and are sought, if at all, only by prayer and sacrifice offered to superhuman and invisible beings. Thus kings are often expected to give rain and sunshine in due season, to make the crops grow, and so on. Strange as this expectation appears to us, it is quite a piece with early modes of thought. A savage hardly conceives the distinction commonly drawn by more advanced peoples between the natural and the supernatural. To him the world is to a great extent worked by supernatural agents, that is, by personal beings acting on impulses and motives like his own, liable like him to be moved by appeals to their pity, their hopes, and their fears. In a world so conceived, he sees no limit to his power of influencing the course of nature to his own advantage. Prayers, promises, or threats may secure him fine weather and an abundant crop from the gods, and if a god should happen, as he sometimes believes, to become incarnate in his own person, then he need appeal to no higher being. He, the savage, possesses in himself all the powers necessary to further his own well-being and that of his fellow men. This is one way in which the idea of a man-god is reached, but there is another. Along with the view of the world as pervaded by spiritual forces, savage man has a different and probably still older conception in which we may detect a germ of the modern notion of natural law, or the view of nature as a series of events occurring in an invariable order without the intervention of personal agency. The germ of which I speak is involved in that sympathetic magic, as it may be called, which plays a large part in most systems of superstition. In early society, the king is frequently a magician as well as a priest. Indeed, he appears to have often attained to power by virtue of his supposed proficiency in the black or white art. Hence, in order to understand the evolution of the kingship and the sacred character with which that the office has commonly been invested in the eyes of savage or barbarous peoples, it is essential to have some acquaintance with the principles of magic and to form some conception of the extraordinary hold which that ancient system of superstition has had on the human mind in all ages and all countries. Accordingly, I propose to consider the subject in some detail. And in the chapter 3 we're up to is a chapter on sympathetic magic, but it's a very, very long chapter, and so I might reserve that for another video. Maybe I decide to keep making videos read from this book, The Golden Bough. Anyway, enough for tonight. Mama T's tired, babies. Beautiful people of planet Earth, and my kings and my queens of the music scene, and my gorgeous ones, and my kings and queens of my heart, and my kings and queens of our own survival to thrival, babies. You can see here when I refer to someone as a king of the Brisbane music scene, I'm actually saying that they're both a magician and a priest and held in high esteem within that community. Apparently maybe only by me, but no. There was no sarcasm or mischief inferred by that. It was meant quite heartfelt. And by the way, there's more than one king in that scene. You know who you are, my darlings. So Mama T, queen of her own destiny, bids you good night. Blessed be from Titania's realm at Sacred Space.